Thank you, Lauren. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to see everyone. And today we're starting a new sermon series. Now, I don't know about you, but I myself love a good story. I'm always on the lookout for the next great movie, the next series to stream on Netflix, the next podcast or audiobook to listen to. I love a good story. And I think stories have been like a thing that has gone across cultures, and it's been in part of the human experience. It's how we make sense of ourselves. It's how we create a language to talk about our lives and the relationships we have with other people. And having the name Luke has kind of predestined me to be a bit of a Star Wars fan. I can't, ever since I was a little kid, dads have been coming up to me and saying, "Luke, I am your father," and thinking it was the most funny thing ever, because surely no one's ever said that to me before. But no, I loved Star Wars, right? I remember being a kid and being out in the backyard and having lightsaber fights with the air, and I was, obviously Luke Skywalker, the hero, and defeating the Dark Lord. I was putting myself in the story. I was seeing myself as the hero. But then also, I remember the first time I read one of my favorite books, Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis. And as I was reading that book, I found myself in that story and identifying with the main character and realizing, oh, I have some of the same weaknesses and blind spots as that main character does. And it gave me a way to describe sort of my own self and some of the relationships and things that were going on in my life during that season. And so stories are a way for us to enter into them and kind of see a bigger picture, to see ourselves in them, to learn a language to talk about ourselves and others. And we're going to be talking about stories that Jesus told, right? We're talking about the parables of Jesus. And these are stories that Jesus told in a specific time and place in order to communicate something. Parables are ordinary stories that use what we can see to show us something that we don't see about God, ourselves, and others. There are these stories that might even seem very simple, very sort of plain in a certain way, because they're talking about ordinary life, at least ordinary life at the, 1 BC or 1 AD. But sort of ordinary life, and kind of trying to show something that's bigger, trying to encapsulate these spiritual truths in these sort of very ordinary stories. And our hope is that as we go through this sermon series, that you would find yourself in these stories, that you would find yourself in God's story and find a way to talk about what's going on in your life and in your season. So today we're going to be looking at a very familiar parable, right? The parable that Lauren read for us, the parable of the prodigal son. And one of the things about familiarity is sometimes the more familiar we are with something, the less we tend to see it, the less clearly we see the details. It's kind of human nature to just shortcut things, to kind of move from the beginning straight to the end. And today, I want to help you not to do that with this story. You've maybe heard it a number of times. I kind of get it. But today, we're going to kind of give you a sermon that's a little bit different. Silas is going to help me out. And our hope is that in presenting it to you in a slightly different way, that you will connect with it, that you'll be able to soak in it today and hear what perhaps the Lord is saying to you. So with that, but we have to consider at what point, what was happening when Jesus decided to tell this story, right? It doesn't just happen out of nowhere. Jesus was talking to specific people. So let's look at Luke chapter 15, verses 1 and 2, or not 1 and 2. Is it 1 and 2? There we go. All right. Says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, 'This man receives sinners and eats with them.'" So right here, these two verses have sort of three parties. We've kind of got Jesus standing here in the middle, and then we've got tax collectors and sinners, and then we've got the scribes and Pharisees. So let's just talk about tax collectors and sinners, because especially tax collectors, because just to be completely clear, the Bible doesn't have something against the IRS necessarily. So tax collectors come up a lot in the Gospels. And it's not just sort of simple tax collectors like we would think about them. Imagine with me for a moment that we are in Europe during World War II, and our town has been taken over by the Nazis, and we're now occupied by them. And your neighbor you've known for a long time, has decided to just volunteer himself to work for the Nazis and to kind of help the occupying army. Now, I don't think we would have very good feelings toward that individual, and that's probably a bit of an understatement. But that is kind of what's going on at this time in Israel, right? These tax collectors are working for the occupying government of the Roman Empire, who came in and they conquered. And so these tax collectors are Israelites, native people who have decided to work for this foreign government that controls them. And they go about and they collect your hard-earned money, and they take a little bit more than they should in order to pay for themselves. And then they also take that money and then they give it to that government that's oppressing you, that came in and conquered you. Tax collectors were not popular. They were seen as traitors and just outcasts. And then sinners are being lumped in together with tax collectors. And these would be people who were publicly known for their wicked behavior. Think about like town drunks, like people who were thieves, swindlers, prostitutes. These are people who are publicly known for their evil behavior. And tax collectors and sinners, these are people who are not allowed in church. They're not allowed in the synagogue. They are outcasts. They are not in keeping with the law. They're not in keeping with moral standards. But these are the people that Jesus is spending time with. These are the people that Jesus is having meals with. He's not just talking with them casually in the street. He's going into their homes. He's sitting down at their tables and having meals that they prepared for him. And then we have the scribes and Pharisees, who are the people you actually would expect Jesus to be getting along with. These are the religious people. These are the people who go to church every single Sunday. They didn't go to church on Sunday, but you know what I mean. They were the people who had the Bible memorized. They obeyed the laws. They did the rules. They were good people. They were like holy rollers, right? These would have been people who wanted to talk about theology and the nuances of the Bible. These are the people that you would think Jesus would get along with, but he doesn't. And they're not the ones next to Jesus. They're the ones that are at a distance to him. And I'm sure that they're standing together and they're probably talking and saying to one another that verse from the first Psalm where it says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, who stands not in the way of sinners, who sits not in the seat of scoffers." Surely you are the people, the company you keep. Why is this man, this Jesus, if he is a prophet of God, a man of God, why is he sitting with those who dishonor God, who are scoffers, sinners, and wicked people? And so we have this situation here, and this is where Jesus comes in and he tells 3 parables. And the prodigal son is the last of those 3 parables. And he turns and he tells the scribes and Pharisees, as he was sitting at the table with the tax collectors and the sinners, he turns and he tells them this parable. And the parable begins in verse 11, where it says that Jesus told them a parable. And he said that there was a man who had 2 sons.
Good morning. I don't recognize many of you here. You don't seem to be from around here. My house is right down the lane there. Or at least it used to be my home. See, I didn't leave in the best of ways with my family. I've been gone for some time. Right now, coming back, I really don't know how my family will receive me. Not really sure how my father will receive me. We didn't have a good last talk, I guess you could say. Wasn't the best way to leave. Can I be honest with you for just a moment? It's hard being the younger brother. You're always told to wait, and your older brother is always put in charge of you, and you never seem to have any freedom to do what you want and actually be the person that you want to be. And growing up, I just wanted a little bit of freedom, and I wanted to be who I wanted to be, have the resources to go do the things that I wanted to do. And I mean, I knew I was going to grow up eventually. I knew that my inheritance would come at some point, and that I would be able to get to go do those things. But as I started looking at my father, who's actually doing pretty well for himself, both financially and health-wise, it didn't seem like that opportunity would come anytime soon. It actually seemed like I would be just as old as he was before the time for me to actually go and be free and do the things that I wanted to. I would be too old to actually enjoy that freedom, someone who can actually enjoy the pleasures of life. And so I began to think, if my father's not going to, die anytime soon, what do I do? And I can see the look on some of your faces. Don't get me wrong. I had no intention of hurting my father in any way, but I don't know. I started to think of ways, and I thought maybe he would give me my inheritance early. I know that's basically like a slap in the face, but I wanted to go do what I wanted to do and have that freedom. And so I approached my father, and I knew what he was going to say. He was going to say no. I mean, what father, is going to take his son saying that to him and give it? But actually he was filled with grace, and he gave me that, and I was so elated. I had what I needed, and so I did my best to sell as much as I could of all the possessions that I had, and I got away. I got away from my family. I went to the city where no one would know me. I wouldn't have any family responsibilities, no one to tell me what to do, and I had all the resources to have everything that my heart desired, and I didn't keep anything from what I wanted. I did everything. I had the food. I had lovely places to stay. I had all the wine, and I had friends galore and women, and everything was wonderful. Even in the end, everything was wonderful. But as I was still enjoying those things, I realized there was something. Something was not quite right. I kept ending up at the end of the night saying to myself, Is this it? I had everything I wanted. All the freedom. It's hard to describe, but I felt like this traveling person who never had a home, never had a place to actually be satisfied and feel cared for and loved. And now standing on the edge of my property, my father's home, I guess I really never took the time to feel at home here now. Well, by my appearance, I assume that you know that the wealth wasn't infinite. Don't get me wrong, I knew how to handle money well. My father taught me. I worked under him for a long time. I was a hard worker. I invested my money. I did well with it. I didn't squander it on everything. Sure, I enjoyed it, but I knew that I would have to prepare for hard times, and I couldn't just spend it all. And so I invested, but no one could have expected the famine that struck. And I turned around, and it was all gone. All of it. And my clothes were repossessed, and my house was taken away, and everything that I had, I was penniless. So I thought, well, I know how to work hard. I worked in my father's fields. I can fix this. And so I hired myself out, and I went to go work for an individual who seemed to be the only one surviving in this famine. But it ends out that he doesn't pay me and doesn't feed me and cheats me out of all of that. And I end up working for a pig farmer. I know I'm not going to get any sympathy from you, and I can begin to see that you're already changing your thoughts on me. I know I'm unclean. They're disgusting. The law of Moses clearly states that I am unclean. I'm not a part of society anymore. I can't come and be a part of you all. I'm alone. But I had to work somehow, and so I had a lot of time to think while working with the pigs, and there were many days where I went without food, and I didn't used to be this skinny. And as I was looking at the food the pigs were eating, I actually became envious. I was so hungry. So far from home. And with all that time to think, I began to think about my father's home and his fields and animals and about the servants there. You know, the servants, they've always been well fed, put under my father's roof, and clothed and taken care of. Surely my father would never accept me back as a son. But he may have the grace to invite me back as a slave. So I got up and now I'm here, and now I'm standing at the edge, and I'm not coming here as a son. I have no right to walk in to his household as a son. Not after I've squandered all of his possessions and his good things on things that would absolutely shame my father. And honestly, I don't even want to go. I know what his face will look like. I don't want to see him and the shame that I will have brought him. I can physically feel the chains of my past calling me to step back, and I can't step forward. There's a man running through the fields. It's my father. He's calling my name. My father is running towards me.
I can't believe it. This is ridiculous. I'm just so frustrated. I'm sorry. I don't know you. You don't really know me, but you guys look like pretty reasonable people. And there's just some family drama going on right now. I'm sure you guys know what that's like, but just so angry. See, I can explain this to you, right? I think you guys will get where I'm coming from. You haven't gone insane like my father has. See, my brother, well, no, not my brother. The man who used to be my brother came back today, came back to our home. See, he had left a couple years ago. He was always the spoiled younger brother. If you're the older sibling, you know what I'm talking about, where they just always get what they want, spoiled, they don't know what hard work is. And well, my younger brother was just so impatient. He couldn't wait to be out on his own, to be a big man. And so he decides to ask our father for his portion of the inheritance early. That's just disgusting. And he just does it. And what does my father do? My father gives it to him. He divides up his inheritance and gives him his third. That's just terrible. It's just so frustrating. Any other man would have just disowned him at that point. But no, my father just gives it to him. And I mean, it was kind of nice for myself to know what the 2/3 I was going to get, what my inheritance was going to be. So that was kind of nice. But really, and then my younger brother, he takes his third, he sells it all off, and then he just goes. And he goes, lives far away. And we heard some reports every once in a while about how he was living. Let me just put it kindly and say that he was not in keeping with our good family name. And so, right, because he just didn't know what he was doing. He was just so reckless. He spent all of his money. He lost it all. And what does he do? He comes crawling back today. Without a penny to his name. But the thing is what does my father do? Instead of my father telling him to turn around and go right back to where he came from, my father acts like a fool and runs through the field to go hug him. That's ridiculous. So undignified for a man of his stature to be doing that. And then what does my father say? My father says, oh, let's pull out and put a fine robe on my son's shoulders. Let's put a family ring on his finger. Let's kill the fattened calf. Let's have a celebration and invite the entire town to celebrate my lost son returning. That's just ridiculous. And where was I during all of this? I was out in the field working. I was doing my responsibility. And I have to ask you the question, and the thing that is frustrating me is, where's my celebration? Where's my robe being placed on my shoulders? Where's the ring being put on my finger? Where's my fattened calf? I'm the one who stayed here. I'm the one who has always done what was right. I've kept good name for myself, for my family. I've never left. I've been the perfect son. And yet, he, this lazy bum, comes back and my father just gives this feast for him, which, by the way, is coming out of my belongings. That's my inheritance that's being spent on throwing him some sort of coming back party. Like coming back erases all the things that he did. He doesn't deserve my father's forgiveness or my father's inheritance or those things. He can't take those things. Those don't belong to him because he doesn't deserve it. But I do. I worked hard in order to deserve my inheritance, to deserve being my father's son. I worked for that. That's something I did. And it's being just given away to him. It's ridiculous. And you bet that I'm going to stay out here, that I'm not going to go into that festival, into that celebration. And everyone's going to see that I'm not in there. Everyone's going to notice that I'm not in there and I'm refusing to reconcile. If my foolish father wants to forgive Halsey-Bum and reconcile with him, go right on ahead. But I'm not going to. I refuse. I would rather not. You know, it's just ridiculous. My father's so sentimental. You know, ever since my younger brother left, he would always leave an empty seat sitting at that table. He would always leave it open, somehow hoping someday his son would return. Well, now he has. But you know what? I'm going to stay out here. And I'm not going to go sit at that table. Guess what, Father? It looks like there's still going to be an empty seat at that table. Two sons who both, in different ways, were so distant from their father. Two sons who both prioritized the father's inheritance, the father's good gifts and things, over knowing the love of the father, over having a relationship with him. I want to tell you that our loving Father in heaven has abundance of forgiveness for all of us and has a seat saved at the table for all of us. Whether you find yourself in today's story or somewhere in the mixture of those two, whether you find yourself to be perhaps a little bit more and similar to that of the younger brother, you feel like you've been in a far-off land. You feel like you've been distant from God the Father, like you haven't connected. Maybe you feel like you've been looking and searching and trying to find that significance, that meaning, those things that will satisfy you, that sense of belonging and home, but you haven't been able to find it. Every rock you turn just turns out empty. And maybe even the idea of just knowing God as Father at all, ever, period, is a completely foreign concept to you. And I want to encourage you, and I want to let you know that God loves us, that God is a loving Father who loves us perfectly, who has an abundance, who wants to come and give you an embrace in his love. Jesus has a seat saved at the table for you. And if perhaps you maybe find yourself a little bit more connecting with the story of the older son, the one who was always so close to the Father, but never really connecting with him, never really knowing the Father's love. Maybe you've gotten into a place in your life where you've prioritized doing things for God over being present with God, being a worker for God instead of being a daughter or son of God. Maybe you find yourself in those deep moments of honest reflection. If we're truly honest, there's a bit of pride, a bit of moral certainty and spiritual pride that I perhaps have somehow earned my standing with God more than other people. And it comes out in weird ways, in ways that we interact with others around us. Maybe you find yourself constantly coming and knowing God and knowing about God, but not really knowing him. And maybe feeling like he doesn't really know you, even though you're so close. I want to say to you that God has a seat saved for you at the table. And so, if you find yourself in either of those places, Jesus has abundance of love and forgiveness. He wants you to know that you do not have to stand on the outside, that you don't have to earn the Father's forgiveness by any means. It's freely given. Your sonship and daughtership, that is something that was bought on the cross, and that is just given to you. You don't earn it. You don't have to get it back. It's something that is yours. God longs to call you his child, and he longs for you to know that you are his child. We're going to give you some time to reflect during the service now, to kind of see where you are in that, to have a dialogue with God. And we're being in silence. We're going to be in the back if you want some prayer over that. And the worship band is going to do 2 songs. And also, during this time, we're going to have communion available. If you call yourself a believer, I encourage you to take communion today. Come up, take the bread, dip it into the juice. And that is the way that we together as a community physically, literally take part of being at the table with Jesus. Knowing that Jesus Christ, through his life, death, burial, and resurrection, has made a way for us to sit and to belong at the table. So as you take communion today, know that you and everyone else belongs at that table. There is no shame there. Silas is going to come up with me, and he's going to join in praying a prayer with me. And we're going to offer 2 prayers. And if you find yourself in either of those 2 places, identifying with the younger brother or the older brother, or somewhere in between, I would encourage you to let these prayers be your prayer to the Lord.
Father, we, your younger children, find ourselves in need of your loving embrace. We have been in a far-off land, and we have no regard for you. We have taken your good gifts in life and sought to find satisfaction in them alone without really knowing you. Some of us have been wandering. Some of us have never met you before. As we approach you, we feel a shame that threatens to cause us to turn around. We want freedom from our past and to know your grace and acceptance. Father God, we here today come to you and ask to be your child. We want to sit at the table and know you today.
Heavenly Father, we, your older children, find ourselves with hearts that need to be softened. We recognize that we have been so close to you, but we have neglected our real relationship with you. We have thought that we could earn your love, that we were somehow more deserving of your approval than our peers. Father, forgive us of our pride against you and against our brothers and sisters. Fill us with your love so that we might not be cynical, but be gracious. Pull us close. Lord, help us to know what it means to be your children, and that there is nothing we could ever do or not do that would change how you feel about us. Lord, help us to know what it is to be known by you. We want to sit at the table and know you today. Father, fill all of us today with your love and Holy Spirit. Impress upon us all of your goodness as a Father and the abundance of your grace given to us. I pray that today shame, guilt, and regret would have no place in our hearts. I pray that in this room we might all see you today and know that you long to run up to us and hold us in your loving embrace. It is in and through the work in the name of Jesus Christ that we pray all of these things.